we were looking at the properties of Hermitian operators. We saw one property, the property is that any eigenvalue of a Hermitian operator has to be a real number. Now, we want to look at one more property. This is regarding orthogonality of the eigenfunctions. So, we imagine that we have this operator A. It has the eigenfunctions which we denote as psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, etc. and the corresponding eigenvalues are A1, A2, A3, etc. And what we will prove is that any one of these eigenfunctions belonging to different eigenvalues will be orthogonal. This is what we will prove. And the way the proof goes is like this. Because A is Hermitian, I know that A operating upon any acceptable function psi multiplied by phi star integrated over the whole space must be equal to A operating upon phi multiplied by psi star volume element D2 integrated over the entire space star. So, these two numbers must be complex conjugates of each other for any two acceptable state functions psi and phi. So, now what we will do is we will imagine that this psi is one of these eigenfunctions. Let us say it is the nth eigenfunction having an eigenvalue which is a n, correct, and phi I will choose it to be the mth eigenfunction, okay, psi m, having an eigenvalue which we will denote as a m. And further I will also assume that a m and a n are different. So, they do not have the same eigenvalue, but they have different eigenvalues. So, a m is not equal to a n. So, let me evaluate the left hand side of this equation. The left hand side is going to be integral d2 psi m star. I am just evaluating this part, A operating upon psi n, that is the left hand side, this part. And if you look at this expression, what is going to happen? A is operating upon psi n. Psi n is an eigenfunction of this operator. So, what is going to happen? The result will be psi n multiplied by the eigenvalue a n. So, therefore, this will become integral d2 psi m star a n psi n, but a n is just a number. So, it is not necessary for me to keep it here. I can take it from there and move it to this place. So, therefore, this will become integral a n multiplied by psi m star psi n. Okay. So, that is the left hand side. Now, we will evaluate the right hand side. Maybe I will start from here. The right hand side is actually integral d2 psi is identified with psi n. The psi, instead of psi I am going to put psi n. So, I will have psi n inside, then I will have a, well the psi n should be having a star, then I will have a operating upon the phi is identified with the psi m. So, I will have psi m, and then of course, so the whole thing after evaluation I have to take the complex conjugates, correct. And now, what is a operating upon psi m? Psi m is an eigenfunction of a. So, therefore, this is going to be equal to integral d2 psi n star a m psi m. but this am I can move out. So, I will have am integral d2 psi n star psi m, the whole thing star. Correct? And this star, suppose I perform the star operation, I am going to get am star, but am is an eigenvalue of the Hermitian operator. So, am is assured to be real. So, the star operation, taking the complex conjugation does not affect am. So, what will happen is you actually, I could say am star, but am star is the same as am because am is real, multiplied by the star of this, and what is going to happen, you are going to get psi n. This star you take inside psi n star star, that is nothing but psi n, and psi m you have to take the complex conjugate. So, we evaluated the left hand side is equal to that. We evaluated the right hand side is equal to that. So, therefore, that implies that these two have to be equal, correct. For a Hermitian operator, this has to be equal to that, and let us write that equation. What it says is that am into integral d2 psi n psi m star is equal to a n into integral psi m star psi n. This is what happens. And so, if you took the right hand side to the left hand side, what are you going to get? You are going to get am. You see that this and that are the same. So, therefore, what you are going to get is am minus an into integral psi m star psi n d2 must be equal to 0. This is the result that you are getting, but then we have already said that we are interested only in the cases where am is not equal to an. So, therefore, am minus an cannot be 0, and therefore, I am perfectly justified in dividing throughout by this expression. If this was 0, then I cannot divide by that, but by definition am minus an is not 0 because the two eigenvalues are not the same. So, you divide throughout by this, and what do you find? You find that the mth eigenfunction must be orthogonal to the nth eigenfunction. We have seen examples of this, for example, in the case of particle in a one dimensional box or harmonic oscillator. Even in the case of the hydrogen atom, you can show that this is valid. But you may ask, what will happen if the eigenfunctions have the same eigenvalue? Then the proof is not valid, and they need not be orthogonal. Okay, they need not be orthogonal, but normally, because we want everything to be orthogonal, once we get the eigenfunctions, we make sure that they are orthogonal, and that is always possible. Okay. Okay, having seen this, I now want to again go back to the postulate 3. And discuss that a little bit. Well, let us imagine that I have an operator A corresponding to some observable which I may perhaps denote by the symbol A. For example, it could be momentum, or it could be energy, it could be any one of the maybe angular momentum or some such observable is there, and I have an operator corresponding to that. And that operator will have eigenfunctions which we have denoted by the symbols I1, Psi2, Psi3, Psi4, etc. And the corresponding eigenvalues are A1, A2, A3, A4, etc. And further, I will assume that if I took any eigenfunction, maybe the mth eigenfunction and multiplied it by the nth eigenfunction and integrated over the entire space. Okay. I am going to now say that okay, this is such that the answer is equal to 1 when m is equal to n, when if they are the same, it is the answer is 1, and this is equal to 0 if m is not equal to n. So, I will assume that. Okay, I have already performed this normalization business. So, each function is normalized and each function I will assume is orthogonal to the remaining functions. So, this object, you see, this is an object which is if m is equal to n, I have 1, and if m is not equal to n, I have 0. This usually is written as delta m n. The definition of delta m n is this: if m is equal to n, it is equal to 1, and if m is not equal to n, it is equal to 0. That is the definition of this symbol, and it is referred to as the Kronecker delta. Kronecker is the name of a person. We have already seen another delta, not delta but a delta function. This was introduced by Dirac that we discussed earlier. Now, in addition to this, you see every operator that occurs in quantum mechanics has a very interesting property. The eigenfunctions always form a complete set. I suspect I have discussed this a little bit in connection with the particle in a one dimensional box. What it means is that if you give me any arbitrary function which is an acceptable wave function, then I can expand it in terms of these eigenfunctions. You give me any arbitrary function, it is possible for me to write it as a linear combination of psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, psi 4, etc. That means, suppose you give me a function, any one of you gives me a function phi which is an acceptable function, then this phi may be expressed in terms of psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, etc. How? You can say C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2 plus C3 psi 3 plus etc. So, if that is possible, then you say that the functions form a complete set, and actually all the eigenfunctions of the Hamiltonian operator, they do form a complete set. This is something that is rather difficult to prove mathematically, so we will leave this to the mathematicians. We will just use this information. Okay. So, suppose I have, let us say, a state function which I will temporarily, normally we denote it by the symbol capital psi, but temporarily let me say I denote it by the symbol phi. Suppose this is my state function, and suppose I make a measurement of what? Of the observable which I have denoted by the symbol A, and postulate 3 will tell you that the answer has to be an eigen value of this operator that is associated with the observable. So, therefore, if the operator A has the eigenvalues A1, A2, A3, A4, etc., if I make a single measurement, the answer will be one of these eigenvalues, and I keep on making measurement again and again and again and again, large number of times. It is not necessary that I should get the same answer. I may get answer A1, then A2, then maybe A3. So, finally, if I have made a large number of measurements, then what will I do? I will calculate the average of all these measurements. Okay. So, this is something that I have already discussed. I get A1 N1 times A2 N2 times A3 N3 times etc. Then I can calculate the average. How would I calculate the average? N1 A1 plus N2 A2 plus N3 A3 plus etc. divided by total number of measurements, which is nothing but N1 plus N2 plus N3 plus etc. And quantum mechanics actually gives you a definite procedure for calculating this average. What is the procedure? It says that okay, what you have to do is you will take the state function, which temporarily I have decided to denote by the symbol phi. This is my state function. Allow it to be operated upon by the operator corresponding to the observable A, then multiply the result by the complex conjugate of phi and integrate over the entire space. And if your function is not normalized, you will have to divide this by phi star phi d2, and this is referred to as the expectation value of A. And this average, this experimentally measured average is actually equal to this expectation value. So, therefore, if you know the state function, it is not necessary to do the measurements. Actually, you can use the state function and calculate the average, and that is the use of quantum mechanics. You do not have to do the experiment. If you do not want to do it, you can get the same result by doing this calculation. Now, I will also assume at least for this lecture that phi is normalized, right. So, that means this is equal to 1. So, therefore, if I wanted to calculate the expectation value of A, this is the formula that I have to use. I mean, strictly speaking, I should have this other term also which divides it, but we will assume that the function normally we always normalize the function. So, therefore, the integral will be 1. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to suppose I wanted to calculate the average of a large number of measurements of the square of the observable A. Well, if you are doing the experiment, what you will do is you would have measured the value of A1, then here in this expression you will put instead of A1 you will put A1 square, there you will put A2 square, there you will put A3 square and so on, right. And so, the same thing, if you wanted to calculate, all that you need to do is instead of putting A, you just have to put A square, and what will that be? It will be integral d2 phi star A phi. Oh, sorry, minor mistake, it is not A but A square. Now, just to illustrate the points, what I am going to do is I am going to say I have a phi. Suppose phi is actually of the form maybe C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2. Okay, to work things out, I will take such a simple example and then see what will happen if I had a general function which may be written as a linear as a combination of C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2 plus C3 psi 3 C4 psi 4 etc. But to do the calculations, maybe it is simpler just to assume that phi is given by C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2. So, this obviously is not an eigenfunction. You see, psi 1 is an eigenfunction of A, psi 2 also is an eigenfunction of A, but this combination is not an eigenfunction of A, right. So, I am imagining that I have such a situation that my state function is not an eigenfunction of the operator whose observable I am measuring, correct. So, if you did this, if I now calculate the value of expectation value of A, this incidentally is referred to as the expectation value of A, this is equal to integral d2. What is going to happen? I would have A operating upon C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2, and that is to be multiplied by what object? C1 psi 1 plus C2 psi 2, but with a complex conjugate. Fine. And now you can look at this expression, A is operating upon C1 psi 1, C1 is just a number, it is a constant and C2 also is a constant. So, what will happen? A will simply operate upon psi 1 or A will operate upon psi 2. A can be taken inside the bracket and allowed to operate upon these two things. So, what is going to happen is I will get integral d2 C1 maybe the star operation can be taken inside C1 star psi 1 star plus C2 star psi 2 star multiplied by this A, I am going to take it inside, allow it to operate upon these things. So, the answer will be C1 A1 psi 1 plus C2 A2 psi 2. Now, you see when you have such a product, well here I have already used the fact that psi 1 is an eigenfunction of the operator. Now, when you have such a product, obviously you are going to get 4 terms, right, as a result of multiplying it out. Let me just write the first term. The first term is going to be integral d2, first term will be obtained by combining these two, okay. D2, well I know that I am going to have an integral, but then of course C1 is a constant, so it is not affected by the integration. A1 also is unaffected by the integration, so let me write those things outside. Imagine that I have an observable A associated with, I have the operator which we normally denote by A with a hat on top of it, and I have another observable B associated with which we have the operator B. And for example, A could be the x coordinate of the particle and B could be the corresponding momentum. And the generalized uncertainty principle, which we will prove, states that delta A square into delta B square, these are uncertainties in A and B, it states that it has to be greater than or equal to minus 1 by 4 expectation value of the commutator of A and B the whole square. Now, this of course requires explanation. What do I mean by the commutator of A and B? Let me first define the commutator. When I write two operators A and B within such a square bracket, this means that I am thinking of A, B minus B A, okay. So, this is the meaning of writing A comma B within this kind of square brackets. And just to illustrate, let me imagine that A is actually x, okay, the operator corresponding to position, and B is the operator corresponding to momentum, which we normally write as Px. So, therefore, let me say I want to calculate the commutator of x with Px. So, by definition it is actually going to be, well these are operators. So, therefore, what I will have is I will also have a psi on which the operators will operate. Psi could be any function. So, the definition of that is actually x Px operating upon psi minus Px x operating upon psi. And the question is, what is this? Well, let me calculate this. How do I calculate that? The answer is, I can say, okay, this is equal to x. Px is actually minus I h cross dou by dou x. So, this has to operate upon psi, and if it operates upon psi, what happens? You will get the derivative of psi with respect to x multiplied by x, and of course multiplied by minus I h cross, and from there you have to subtract what? Minus I h cross dou by dou psi dou x operating upon x into psi. And let me try to calculate this. Okay. The first term is actually x into, well, maybe I will expand this, I will remove the bracket. So, minus I h cross x into dou psi by dou x is the first term, and what happens to the second term? Well, obviously this minus and that minus will make it a plus, and I h cross dou by dou x operates upon a product of two terms, and so you are taking the derivative of a product of two terms. Naturally, you are going to get the following. You are going to get plus I h cross dou by dou x will operate upon x. So, the answer will be just psi, and you will have plus I h cross dou by dou x will operate upon psi, and the answer will be x into dou psi by dou x. And you can see that the first and the last term, these two terms cancel nicely, and hence the result is just I h cross into psi. So, the commutator of x and p x operating upon any arbitrary function psi is just the same as multiplying that psi by I h cross. What does this mean? This means that the commutator of these two operators is actually equivalent to multiplication by I h cross. Okay. Having calculated the commutator, let me use it in this inequality. So, what will I do? I will identify A with x, right, A with x and B with p x. So, here I am going to have the square of the uncertainty in x, and this is going to be the square of the uncertainty in p x, and that would be greater than or equal to minus 1 by 4 expectation value of the commutator, but the commutator is just I h cross, right. So, you will have I h cross expectation value, but then it is just the expectation value of a constant, and the expectation value of a constant is just that constant itself. So, therefore, it is not necessary for me to put this expectation value there. The answer is just the constant, and then you have to take the square. So, therefore, you will have the whole thing square. And if you took the square, what does it mean? I square is obviously minus 1, so that will cancel this minus sign. So, you are going to get 1 by 4 h cross square, and this obviously means, sorry, there is a square that I should have put here, which I forgot. So, now I take the square root of this, and what happens? I shall get the relationship delta x into delta p x must be greater than or equal to h cross divided by 2, which actually is the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So, using this generalized uncertainty relationship, you can actually arrive at the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which says that delta x into delta p x must be greater than or equal to h cross divided by 2. To make the ideas clear, let me take an actual example. I am going to say that I have a state function phi, which is equal to e to the power of minus x square divided by 4 a square I hope the notation is clear. E to the power of minus x square by 4a square divided by 1 by 2 pi a square to the power of 1 by 4. You may wonder why this 1 by 4. Answer is extremely simple. This function is normalized, and this is the normalization factor, that is all, nothing more to it. If you look at this function, what will be the appearance of the function? Answer again is extremely simple. If you made a plot of this function against x, you will get a what is referred to as a Gaussian okay. In fact, this wave function is just the wave function for the harmonic oscillator. If you had chosen a to be equal to some constant, I do not remember what that constant is, but if you choose a to be that particular constant, then this is just the eigenfunction for the harmonic oscillator. Now, the width of this function, this is actually what is referred to as a Gaussian. The width of this actually is roughly I mean, I would say it is proportional to a. Roughly speaking, it is 2 times a, roughly, I mean the width of the function. So, if I had a very small, what will happen is that the function is very narrow, while if I had a large, what will happen, the function is very broad. Okay. If it is very narrow, it will be highly peaked, right, because the function is normalized, right. So, now if you had such a function, and suppose you make a measurement of position, this such a wave function implies that the particle will be found in this region with a fairly large probability, but if you were somewhere here, the probability of finding it is very small. That is what such a wave function means, and therefore, I can ask what will be the average value of its position. If I make a large number of measurements, sometimes I may find the particle here, or sometimes there, or sometimes there. I make large number of measurements, I do the averaging, and the average value of the position of the particle will be obtained by a quantum mechanical calculation as expectation value of x. What will it be? It is going to be integral phi star, well, star has no effect on this function. So, phi star x phi d2 or dx, because it is, this is a one dimensional problem, and the limits of integration are from minus infinity to plus infinity. I do not have to do this calculation, because I suspect that you will be able to tell me what this is actually, what the answer will be if you did the calculation, because this function is symmetric about the origin, about this point, it is an even function. So, therefore, what will happen, the probability that the particle will be found on this side will be the same as the probability that will be found on the other side, and therefore, this when you calculate the average has to be 0. So, but then suppose I wanted to calculate x square, what will be the expression? It is going to be minus infinity to plus infinity phi star x square phi dx. I do not have any choice other than to calculate this, right. So, how will I calculate this? Let us just substitute for phi 1 by 2 pi a square to the power of 1 by 2, right, that is coming from phi star phi. Then I will have x square e to the power of minus x square divided by 2 a square, and well, I do not have space. So, maybe I will put a dx here and integrate from minus infinity to plus infinity. So, this integral, it is necessary to evaluate it. Let me go ahead and evaluate it. I shall get 1 by 2 pi a square to the power of half integral minus infinity to plus infinity dx x square e to the power of minus x square by 2 a square. I have just rewritten the integral because you see your integrand is an even function. What I can do is I do not have to integrate from minus infinity to plus infinity. It is enough if I integrate it from 0 to infinity, provided I multiply the result by a factor of 2. And the next thing that I will do is I will make a substitution. What is the substitution that I will do? X square by 2 a square, I am going to say it is equal to y, because I have e to the power of minus x square by 2 a square. I want to simplify the appearance of this. So, x square by 2 a square is equal to y, or maybe what I can do is, instead of saying that, I could say x divided by square root of 2 a square is equal to y. That is my substitution, that is better. X divided by square root of 2 a square. Oh no, sorry, that is a mistake. X square divided by 2 a square is equal to y. This is my substitution. So, that actually means x is equal to square root of 2 a square into square root of y. Okay. Which obviously implies that dx is equal to square root of 2 a square into square root of y. Another mistake, always I seem to make two mistakes successively. So, dx will be equal to that much. So, let me do this integral 2 divided by 2 pi a square to the power of 1 by 2 integral 0 to, well, when x is 0, y has to be 0, when x is infinity, y has to be infinity. So, therefore, the limits are still from 0 to infinity. Dx is equal to so much. So, you will get square root of 2 a square divided by 2 root y into dy. X square, where is it? X square is equal to x square by 2 a square is y. So, therefore, x square may be written as 2 a square y and e to the power of minus y. So, if I took this square root of 2 a square out, there is another 2 a square this 2 also, I mean, please watch carefully, I would not want to miss any 2 or anything. So, this 2 also I have to take out, and then what will happen? I will have integral 0 to infinity dy. There is a y here, there is a square root of y in the denominator. So, therefore, y to the power of half e to the power of minus y. So, let me cancel out the 2's. 2 a square also goes. I suppose this is correct. Correct me if there is a factor of something missing. right. Now, this is an integral that hopefully will be familiar to you. This is known as a gamma integral or a gamma function. The definition of a gamma function, I should write it somewhere. Maybe I can write it here. This is the definition of a gamma function. It is a function of n, okay, and you can see it is defined as this integral. Now, this is actually a very nice function, because you can easily show that gamma n is equal to n minus 1 gamma n minus 1. I am only writing the properties that I myself shall need, which can be of course proved, but this is not a class in mathematics, so we will not prove any of these things. So, you can easily show that gamma n is actually equal to n minus 1 into gamma n minus 1. In fact, you can further show that gamma 1 is something that you can easily evaluate. You will find it is 1, and gamma of half again something that can be evaluated. The answer is square root of pi. This is all that we will need. So, therefore, if you look at this expression, what is the answer that I am getting? Two a square divided by square root of pi. You can identify that this is a gamma integral, and in fact, it is actually equal to gamma of 3 by 2, that is all. Because if you put n is equal to 3 by 2 in this definition, you are going to get that exactly the same integral, okay. And further, gamma of 3 by 2, I can make use of this relationship. Gamma of 3 by 2, let me write it here, gamma of 3 by 2 will be, if I made use of that, this is actually a recursion relation, will be equal to half of gamma half, using that relationship, and gamma half, you know, it is equal to root pi. So, therefore, using the information from mathematics, we have been able to get the value of the integral, and it is just square root of pi divided by 2, which means that this is equal to 2 a square divided by root pi into the gamma of 3 by 2 is nothing but root pi divided by 2. And therefore, what is the answer that you get? Nicely, this root pi and that root pi, this 2 and that 2 cancel. So, you get the answer a square. So, summarizing all these things, what has happened? We found that x average is equal to 0, x square average you have just now evaluated. X square average is actually equal to, this is what we have evaluated, x square average, it started here, it ended only there, that is actually equal to a square, okay. So, this actually means if I go on measuring the value of x, I will get several different values, they do not have to be the same, I will go on getting different values, but the average of all these will be equal to 0. Then if you took the square and averaged, then obviously that will not be equal to 0, and that average also I have calculated, that is equal to a square. So, therefore, I can define a kind of uncertainty in the measured values of the position of the particle. What is that uncertainty? I mean, the way I would define it is, I would say delta x square is equal to x square average minus x average square. So, therefore, this is going to be equal to a square minus 0 square, which is just a square. right, and therefore, as far as this particular wave function is concerned or particular this state function is concerned, I say that there is some uncertainty in the position of the particle, and how much is that? It is equal to A. Agreed? And that is not surprising, because I told you roughly the width is dependent upon the value of A. If you increase the width of the function, if you wanted to increase the width of this function, you just have to increase the value of A. This is something that I have mentioned in the beginning. You can make this function narrower and narrower by decreasing the value of A, and when you decrease the value of A, what will happen? You are actually decreasing the uncertainty in position, because you saw that the uncertainty in position is actually equal to A according to this calculation. So, you can choose your value of uncertainty, there is no problem by just adjusting the width of this A, right. And now I ask the question, suppose I make a measurement of position of momentum. Now, we were now talking about measuring the momentum, talking about measuring the position. Now, suppose I am going to measure the momentum of the particle. This function is not an eigenfunction of the momentum operator, right. So, therefore, I am going to get different values, and therefore, there should be a measured value of the uncertainty in the momentum of the particle, right. Experimentally determined uncertainty in momentum. How much is that? We will calculate it in the next lecture, and then finally, we will find that the uncertainty principle according to Heisenberg actually follows. When we calculate that and multiply the delta x with the delta p, we will find that the uncertainty principle results. Okay. Thank you for listening.